Wilt thou yield? For before me.
Welcome back to the Mentor Roulette grind. This time, the Wheel of Jobs decided that we play Monk on a Monday evening, and this set was very heavily concentrated on 8-man content. But despite that, for Duty 1 we went to Fell Court of Troia. In terms of personal mistakes, there was one point on the second boss where I absent-mindedly did a Lunar natty while I already had one, but aside from that, the duty went great. An interesting part about optimizing Monk is that at different levels, different smaller optimization tricks matter in regards to specifically perfect balance, such as not using it at level 50. Anyway, particularly at level 90, it is generally considered optimal to open a single boss fight duty with double Solar, meaning 2 Rising Phoenix sequences. The reason for this is that as of Dawntrail, the power difference between the different combo steps is small enough, including at level 90, before the level 92 and 94 potency buffs, that the fact Rising Phoenix does more damage than Elixir Field makes Solar superior. The reason you would do a double anything, essentially throwing away a natty as a result, is that it by extension places Phantom Rush, or at lower level Tornado Kick, on the even minute bursts instead of the odd minute bursts, and due to raid buffs being on the even minute, this is typically preferred. The downside of this is mainly that depending on when the fight ends, this could lead to losing out on a Phantom Rush. But overall, the possible gains tend to outweigh the losses most of the time. However, in a dungeon context like this, even if you do set up your situation such that you do get that even minute Phantom Rush, the cooldown drifting between packs both means it is not consistently the case that raid buffs align, and it is perfectly possible perfect balance, specifically, drifts just so that you end up no longer having Phantom Rush on the even minute depending on what happens. As such, in a dungeon context, it may be preferable to simply build natties as they come. What makes level 90's preference for double Solar so interesting is the fact that pretty much all other level intervals, double Lunar is the preferred option most of the time, including max level. For Duty 2, we went to E6N, Eden's, Garuda and Ifrit, and this was possibly one of the most selfish teams I've ever been a part of. In this fight, there are 2 uncommon mechanics that require teamwork, and some players consistently, actively avoided helping, despite each time having plenty of opportunities to see how it is done. The first such mechanic is what is commonly known as enums or enumerations. These blue circles with a pair of crystals rotating in them. The way this mechanic works is that it is resolved successfully by having at least 2 players in the circle, including the targeted player, when it ends. If resolved correctly, it does basically nothing, beyond giving you a magic wall disabling you from taking 2 of them at once. However, if a player is forced to take it alone, they instead take a huge amount of damage and get yeeted far up in the air, which makes it difficult for them to see the next upcoming mechanic, not to mention making it difficult to avoid getting hit by it. It is very likely that a player getting knocked up in this way dies to what follows after. In this party, however, a surprising amount of players viewed these as spread markers, whether intentionally or not, despite seeing other players intentionally going into the circles to help. The second of these problematic mechanics is this mechanic where players targeted with 3 tethers. Another player can take one by stepping in front of the targeted player, although it can be a bit finicky, so standing still for a second tends to help. When the cast finishes, each tether is attacked by the boss, dealing a bunch of damage and applying a debuff that, if you get 2 stacks of, stuns you for, well, so long that you will probably die to what follows if this attack didn't kill you outright. This means the targeted player needs help from 2 players to survive. Notably, the main tank also gets hit by a tank buster that applies a stack of the same debuff, so preferably they are not helping with the tether. Now, in this team, we were exactly 2 players trying to help the tethered player, which resolved it correctly. However, when I was the target, only one player helped me, and hilariously, you can pretty much see everyone run away from me trying to hand a tether to someone, like some sort of morning cartoon. Anyway, despite the incredible lack of teamwork, we still made it through. For duty 3, we went to Garuda hard. The main tip here is that perfect balance at level 50 is effectively a damage loss. By like a tiny bit, but it's not a game, so simply don't bother, and just focus on the fundamentals of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Another tip is to remember that among most jobs in this level range, Monk, by far, has a very easy time switching between single target and AoE, so when the feather ads appear, simply immediately move over to AoE combos. Although ranged jobs definitely have an easier time intercepting the distant feathers when it comes to that. We, of course, made it through nice and quick. For duty 4, we went to Golbez normal. Remember the tip about double solar in this level range? Well, I forgot in the opener, so on the 2 minute I decided to do the double solar to fix it there. Something worth mentioning on this fight is the double meteor mechanic. In particular, one player becomes the center of a knockback mechanic and simply needs to position themselves in the center of the arena. That way, other players can position themselves around that player to get knocked out to the towers they need to soak. What often goes wrong here is that it is very difficult to know at a glance how strong the knockback is, so most players will feel compelled to either knockback immune it or aim at an angle to have as much distance to slide as possible, sort of negating this convenience. Part of the reason for this may also be because on Extreme, the knockback is strong enough that you have to aim for a corner to make it, where the towers are also situated. Now, one other pretty funny thing that happened in this group was that one of our healers was practically taught why you don't run away with a stack marker. Players were actively chasing them down while they ran away, but as they reached Narnia, we just let them have it alone. The main tip is, if possible, bring stack markers to melee range. Otherwise, tanks and melees may feel compelled to ignore you in favor of their damage uptime. Your main motivation to stay away, after all, tends to be your damage uptime. For duty 5, we went to Ifrit hard, and this party had quite a lot of melees. A neat trick as a barrier healer for this fight is that Ifrit's frequent surprise knockbacks get nullified if the attack deals 0 damage, meaning that a scholar or sage maintaining a barrier on the party can be super convenient for all melee DPS to maintain their uptime. Whether intentional or not, our scholar did exactly that, saving me from needing to use Thunderclap for that, so I could use those for chasing down nails later. For duty 6, we went to M3N, Brute Bomber. And here it becomes abundantly clear I have not played Monk at max level in a real fight for a while, as I completely failed my opener, both wasting the Formless Fist from Masterful Blitz by overriding it with Fire's reply, but also being too late on Wind's reply, taking out the opportunity entirely. Over the course of the fight, I have trouble with planning this out, and later again override Formless Fist in the same way again. On the positive side, I do still manage to keep most cooldowns from drifting, and get plenty of use out of Riddle of Earth, and even some use of Mantra. And near the end of the fight, things suddenly get scary as a lot of players go down in an instant. But we do make it through. For duty 7, we went to Storm the Gates! All you can do here as Monk is 1, 2, 3s. Remember to use Steel Peak, and when nothing else is available, use Meditation. Especially between fights, as that is the only way to get another Steel Peak in this level range. Remember that the frog at the end can be stunned, so make sure to do that when it uses the circle AoE. For duty 8, we went to Protect the Turtle, and once again, it is just all 1, 2, 3s and Steel Peak. I ended up being the only player that went for the Fire Sprite, and for just a moment, I was afraid the team was going to kill the turtle, but we made it. For duty 9, we went to the second trial of Dawntrail. If you don't want to see this, jump to this timestamp here. That said, we went to Everkeep against Soralja, and Lunar the Viper knew me. Hello! Thanks to my mess-ups in M3N earlier, I am much better prepared to get a slightly better opener, not forgetting things. This does include double Lunar to set up the even-minute Phantom Rush, except when Phase 2 begins, I realize it ruined my setup, so I have to double Lunar again to realign it. But then after that, on the following odd minute, I was more busy dealing with mechanics and absent-mindedly did a Lunar perfect balance again. At one point I also lost a Wind's Reply out of bursts by just forgetting to use it entirely. This fight does have mechanics that are punishing enough that it may be worthwhile to stop for a second to focus on the mechanics if you need it. In particular, the mechanic with the blades flying across the arena, taking a second to figure out which spots are safe may be worth it, as later in the fight, Soralja will follow such a mechanic with a multi-stack, and if too many players are dead, there isn't really anything that can be done to recover it. Any job capable of raising others will almost certainly die. Yes, on normal. We, however, had no major problems in this group. For DD10, we went to Under the Amore. And yeah, just 1, 2, 3s all the way. Remember, Snap Punch is a flank positional. Nothing else to say here. For DD11, we went to Ravana Extreme, and before anything can be done, one of the tanks immediately leaves. No big deal, this fight can definitely be solo tanked, so we go for it. We also get a replacement rather fast. For the first pull, we wipe due to both healers standing firm in the center of the arena for liberation. 4 Ravana clones spawn either clockwise or counterclockwise along the edge of the arena, and then one at a time dash across the arena through the middle. As we have no one else that can raise, both healers dying is an automatic wipe. On the second pull, the exact same problem happens again. So for the third attempt, I put a marker on me to indicate the safe spots. And this time, at least one healer lived, so we can progress through the rest of the fight. In fact, we do so much damage this time that we skip the butterfly phase entirely. 2 last notes about the fight is that 1, the white spread marker looking thing is actually a stack, and it can hurt the walls on the edge, so don't take it there. 2, the targeting reticle Ravana puts on one player can be passed around, and it should be passed to a tank. Now, one final thing I've been wondering about is that recently I've started to run into players that use a rather oddly overly polite greeting right at the start of the duty, possibly accompanied by an emote. Then, at the end of the duty, the same player sends 2 lines worth of goodbye statement that is equally oddly overly polite, alongside 1 or 2 emotes. What makes this stand out to me is the fact that the messages are, if memory serves, exactly the same, and are, I think, not the same players, and also typically comes from players with oddly specific rotational mistakes. In this party, it was the Dark Knight doing it. Anyway, I just wanted to mention it because I was wondering if other people have noticed a trend like this too, because it just seems rather strange. Anyway, we of course get the clear once we make it to the last phase with the party alive. For duty 12, we went to M4N, Wicked Thunder. And the main mistake I made throughout here was forgetting to use 6-sided star whenever I was exiting melee range. Typically because I was too greedy with sneaking in other attacks, so I would get scared and run away during Agility instead of using 6-sided star first. So I had to just use Form Shift and Meditation for the downtime, which is not nearly as good as a 6-sided star. There was also a point where I used Leaping Opal without orbs, which is a minor loss, but a loss nonetheless. Overall, the run was very fast, just barely not skipping the 5-fold blasts phase. For duty 13, we went to Yuweyawata Field Station. Overall, the run went super well. However, something odd about the last boss is that fight specifically felt a bit slow? It wasn't really. I'd say most of my runs here tend to end before the second Beastly Roar, the proximity into circling AoEs thing, but this party had the boss still at about 10% HP when that came around. However, around 15 minutes for an Expert Roulette duty clear, I think should be really good. Looking at my party, I would guess the reason why was because of a combination of gear and minor rotational mistakes. First, I am definitely not the most masterful at Monk, so that could have contributed a bit. Another thing is that I think I noticed the Sage spending extended periods not attacking. Not saying that is necessarily a mistake, I might even have seen wrong. And then, the fact the Dragoon had 10k less max HP than me should indicate a significant gear difference. And notably, most of my gear is within the allowed item level of the duty, meaning around 720 to 730. Again, not saying that is a problem, just simply observing the reasons why the run might have gone slightly slower than what I've seen many of my groups do. Still, the duty went well. For duty 14, we went to Lunar Subterrane, and this group went super well. I got the impression that especially me and the dancer were well in sync for our 2-minute bursts, to the point where on the final boss I felt compelled to hold a perfect balance a bit, possibly losing one to readjust, just to make sure my burst was optimized around the burst window offered by the dancer's devilment as well. Speaking of the final boss, a tip. In regards to Forsaken Fount with 4 orbs, combined with Contrapasso, is that while the patterns can face in many directions, there are actually only 2 necessary things to remember. If 3 of the outer orbs are placed next to each other, the safe spot is on the opposite end with the lone outer orb. If, on the other hand, there are 2 pairs of outer orbs, the safe spot is in the center. It has been quite a while since people frequently got this duty, so I thought this tip from Endwalker might be handy, and is also an interestingly simple way to dissect an otherwise somewhat overwhelming mechanic. And finally for duty 15, we went to Hell's Lid, and in this group I saw some oddities from every player. Minor mistakes that definitely could be ironed out, but nothing that massively slowed down the group. First, I noticed the healer had a relatively strong preference for diagnosis and prognosis here and there. Overall, a minor detail, especially since sometimes the team did take a bunch of avoidable damage, so saving OGCD resources might make sense. Second, the paladin would every so often either use Requiescat, but only spend 1 stack of it on a single Holy Spirit. Other times on AoE, they would just skip the attack entirely. Granted, no Holy Circle in this level range, but Requiescat itself does damage. At the same time, they would also frequently skip Holy Spirit with Divine Might. And finally, the Red Mage did not use Embolden once throughout the entire duty, and frequently used Manification, but didn't do anything with it. As in, they would simply let the buff run out. I also feel like I saw a lot less melee combos from them than one should expect. Finally, while most of their filler rotation, of which there was a lot obviously, they did go fast and slow as expected, but very often they would randomly use a slow spell first. Not really any pattern to it, but it happened quite a lot. Hell's Lid is one of those max level dungeons at the early part of Stormblood, so the lack of item level syncing makes it very easy to do, which probably contributes to why the run still took less than 15 minutes, but it was interesting to see this many random details in the party, and we still got through reasonably quickly. Due to a heavy concentration of 8-man content and guild tests, we managed a whole 15 duties in this set. Turns out trials and normal raids, without wipes, are significantly faster than dungeons. Next time, we'll also pass over 800 Mentor Roulette duties, passing over 40% of the way to the end. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Ko-Fi, link in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, before Dawntrail, Twin Snakes applied a damage increasing buff with a duration that meant you had to alternate it and True Strike to maintain it. In Endwalker, 4-Point Fury also applied this effect. Before Endwalker, 4-Point Fury instead simply maintained it, meaning you had to Twin Snakes to apply it first. Not to mention, before 4-Point Fury was unlocked, you had to Twin Snakes on AoE to maintain it at all.